Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Joe.
And this is CrimeDivers.
Hello everybody, welcome to today's episode.
Hello. So before we start, I just thought we would take a minute to thank our lovely listeners.
Yeah, I thought, it's a good idea because we actually have been getting more listeners recently, haven't we? We've kind of, the numbers are steadily going up.
Yeah, so we just want to take, the opportunity to thank you very much for listening to us and taking the time to hear our cases that we cover.
Of course, because without you, then we wouldn't be here because what would be the point? We would just be talking to ourselves.
Exactly, which, we
well, we do that as well.
I was going to say, we used to do that, but,
So, we just want to say thank you and to all our listeners, every little bit of support helps.
Absolutely.
So, and hopefully you'll stay with us on our journey.
Uh-huh.
And, obviously, thank you to our Patreons as well. Can't forget our Patreons.
Yeah, they're doing a brilliant job in supporting us as well.
It's so much appreciated that people would actually take time out of their day, never mind to just listen to our episodes, but to actually pay for the extra bonus content as well.
Exactly.
Because on the Patreon, we do have a couple of extra bonus episodes a month. So it does take a lot of time, to do our normal episodes, then to do the Patreon ones as well. So, so if anybody would like to join our Patreon listeners, then you just head on over to patreon.com/CrimeDivers, and there's 3 different tiers, and it will tell you when you get there. It will tell you what is included in each tier. So
exactly.
Anyway, so we just want to say thank you, everybody, and just to let you all know that we appreciate you
and keep listening.
Yeah, keep listening, please. So today is a lot of sword.
It is a lot of sword.
So
today.
Where in the world are we today?
We're actually in 2 places.
Okay.
So we start off in Ibiza, and we head on over to Peru.
Oh, I think I know this.
Yes.
So what is the name of your...
The name is Confessions of a Drug Mule.
Right.
So
I do know it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying I do know it. I saw the headlines on the news at the time that it happened.
Yes.
So obviously I was aware of what happened. Didn't really follow it.
Yes.
I haven't really got much of a clue of all the ins and outs. So, I'm looking forward to listening to this one, actually.
Yes. So, are you ready to dive in?
Well, let me just get comfy. Right, okay, I'm ready. Let's dive in.
Okay, so my first question was, have you heard of the Peru Two?
Well, if you'd said to me, have you heard of the Peru Two, I would have probably said no.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because that name doesn't ring a bell. Like, I didn't know that's what they were called.
Well, that is what they're... Yeah, that's a massive thing. I'd heard of the Peru Two.
No, if you'd actually said, like, as I said, like, Ibiza and Peru, drug smuggling, I know.
Yeah.
I
Spoiler alert, so for anybody that doesn't know, there's no murders involved in this case.
The title said Confessions of a Drug Mule.
Oh, yeah, did.
So, there's no spoilers there.
But no, we don't have any blood and gore and stuff this time for a change.
Well, we've had a few, but I think all the ones that you've done have all been murders.
Yeah, so this is maybe my first one.
We had a nearly murder one, because the Kill Me If You Can, that was a nearly a murder.
Yes, it was.
It was an attempted murder.
That's very true.
So we don't have anything like that in this one.
No, nothing like that in this one.
Okay.
So, so obviously you have heard of the Peru Two, you just didn't realise that's what they were called.
Yeah, I've heard of them, just didn't know they had a name.
Well, I'm going to tell you now.
Okay.
So they were 2 girls who were called Michaela McCollum. She was born in Dungannon in Northern Ireland, and another girl called Melissa Reid, who was from a place called Lenzie, which is in Glasgow. Well, it's in Scotland, but somewhere in Glasgow. But I'm going to tell you right from the start that this story, it's mostly from the news reports and Michaela's perspective. Okay. As she's actually spoken out about the ordeal, whereas Melissa's kept a very low profile. She's not really spoken out much about it. So this is basically from Michaela's...
So Michaela's the one from Northern Ireland?
Yeah, the one from Northern Ireland. So it's basically mostly from her point of view.
Right.
And her story, because she's actually done a documentary and she's actually released a book as well. So this is all from what her point of view is. So it starts in June 2013 when Michaela was 19. She decided she wanted to escape from her life in Northern Ireland and experience something new. She'd never left Northern Ireland at all, that's where she'd been her whole life. She hadn't been anywhere abroad or anything like that. So she decided she wanted to experience something. So she booked herself a one-way ticket to Ibiza.
Just by herself?
Yeah, just by
A
herself.
19-year-old?
I know, it's quite brave, actually.
That is quite brave.
Because I don't think I could do that.
I would do that now.
Because literally, she just didn't know what she was going there to do. I mean, she just booked a one-way ticket and...
To a place that she's never been before.
And was clearly just going to wing it.
Wow.
I know. I mean, I couldn't do that, but, there are obviously people.
That's quite impressive.
Well, funnily enough, her family thought that she was totally insane, as like I said, she'd never been on holiday and never even left the UK. She didn't know anyone in Ibiza at all, so she just thought she was going to have an absolute ball while she was out there. She didn't even, when she got there, she didn't even unpack, she just headed straight out to party, so dumped her bags and off she went straight out, because I suppose in Ibiza that's what you do, don't you? You go out clubbing and partying and all the rest of it. So she obviously must have been quite confident, because when she went out, I mean, she started to get introduced to what she described as really cool people. She met loads of people over the first few weeks. There was one girl in particular who was called Parry, and she would become her best friend while she was out there. So she's actually in the documentary as well. So you hear her take on things. So they met at a nightclub that Parry was working at, and they just clicked instantly. So they ended up partying quite a lot. They actually did work together, doing some dancing in the clubs. It was just wild. That's what Michaela said. It was just wild. They just had a wild time. So Michaela, she was loving being in Ibiza. But she knew that if she wanted to stay long term, she needed to find herself some regular income. So she actually got herself a bar job. But what she soon found out was that it wasn't just drinks that she was expected to serve. She was expected to serve drugs. So,
right.
So basically, because I think she said there was one night when she was, going over to take someone's order, and they'd ordered their drinks, and then they were like, oh, and can I have whatever type of drug it was? And she was like, well, I don't really do that sort of thing. And she's like, no, if you go over to the bar and ask the barman, they'll obviously send you some over. And she was like, oh, right, okay. So obviously she went over to the bar manager, and she was like, this guy's just asked me for drugs. And he's like, oh, right, yeah, what kinds? I have to say, oh, yeah, that's kind of what we do here.
Well, why wasn't she told that when she applied for the job?
Exactly.
Or given the job?
So basically what they would do is they would get the drinks ready, they would get the drugs that they wanted and put them under a napkin, and then she would obviously just take the drinks over with the tray, and the drugs were under the napkin. Right. And that's what it was.
I find that strange that she wasn't told that.
Yeah, I know, because she seemed when she was telling you about it, she seemed quite innocent about it, oh, I didn't realise that was the case, but maybe she didn't, I don't know. So anyway, she carried on working there, and then Michaela met a guy called Davey, and they started hanging out and seeing each other. But Parry, her best friend, she couldn't understand what Michaela saw in him. She said she didn't get a good energy from the guy, at all. But Michaela obviously was quite into him. She became quite distant from Parry at this point, and other friends had actually warned her to stay away from this Davey as well, because apparently he was a drug dealer.
Okay.
But those friends had been taking drugs all night, so she didn't really take their advice, because she was basically like, well, you're sitting there taking drugs, so how can you tell me to
stay away from
a drug dealer? You've got a cheek, which I suppose that's
true. I can see your point there.
I can see your point there. So one day Michaela asked Parry if she wanted to go to a barbecue with some other friends, so it was friends of Michaela's rather than Parry's, but she asked if Parry wanted to go with her. So Parry said, yeah, we'll go. And she said at the barbecue that they were at, she said it had a very strange vibe, and it seemed very shady. She just felt like there was just stuff going on, that she didn't...
She just felt a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, basically. She said it didn't feel relaxed, and, Parry couldn't understand why Michaela even liked these people. She just wasn't getting, good vibes from them. So Parry said that she felt on edge, and, she could feel like there was something going on, but just not sure what. So apparently David gave Michaela some acid and got her off her face, basically. And then he asked her if she'd like to go on a trip to Barcelona to pick something up. Oh. So, obviously, Michaela, she thought it was drugs, but she didn't think it was a lot. And she was obviously off her face, so she was like, yeah, why not? Short trip to Barcelona, why not? So, she was excited, and she was already thinking about what she would... he obviously offered her money to do it, so she was, she'd got herself excited, and she was already thinking about what she was going to do with the money that she was getting offered to do it with. And she did actually tell, she took Parry at one side, I think they were in the toilets or something, and she told her about it, but, Parry, she just sort of, brushed it off, and she didn't think it was real, and, she didn't think she was actually going to go through with it. She just thought, she's just off her face, she's just, drunk and whatever. And that was actually the last night that Parry saw her.
All right.
So it was early the next morning when Michaela, she was woken up by Davy saying, we need to go now. And she was like still off her face at this point, you know, she's still a bit away with it. And she was like, where are we going? And he's like, we need to go now, you know, we need to go up and pick the package. So she was like, right, okay. So they set off, and then they obviously got to somewhere, and Davey introduced Michaela to the Spanish guy. So Michaela said she was starting to get a bit anxious now, because I think she was coming down from her high, and she was starting to sort of think, oh shit, what am I doing here? But, you know, Davey, he played it down, and he was saying, you know, that they do this all the time, you know, they have guys working in airports and looking out for them, you know, because she was obviously getting a bit of panic about, you know, getting these drugs through. But he was just like totally reassuring her, saying it's fine, you know, I've got friends that, you know, theirs, you know, I say we do this all the time. So then Davey, he hugged her and said goodbye, and she was left with the Spanish guy. So Parry texted her that morning to see how she was, and Michaela said she was in some Spanish guy's apartment and she was going to Barcelona to transport the drugs. So the Spanish guy was called Mateo, and he told her that when she got back to Ibiza, she'd be paid £5,000. So it doesn't seem a lot of money for what, I mean, for what she was...
For what you're risking.
Yeah, and as we'll find out later, for what she actually did risk, it seems pretty pitiful. I mean, she obviously thinks at this point she's just transporting like a small package of drugs.
Okay.
And I suppose, you know, she obviously wanted about £5,000, maybe a lot to a 19-year-old back then.
Well, I mean, it is a lot of money,
and
but...
she wanted to stay in Ibiza, you know, so I suppose it was maybe quite tempting, I guess. So Mateo actually gave her a different mobile phone, as they said that using her own would get her caught. So she was starting to get a bit edgy at this point. Yeah. I think that's when it started to really kick in for her. For, you know, when she got this other mobile phone. And after they'd taken her phone off her, she actually found out she wasn't actually going to Barcelona. She was told she was going to go to Mallorca and meet another girl there, and that basically she's going to go with you and you're going to Lima, that's in Peru. But Michaela didn't realise at the time where Lima was. She didn't realise
it was in Peru.
It was in Peru. She actually thought it was somewhere in Spain.
Oh, cool.
So she hadn't heard of it, and she thought it was still in Spain somewhere. So she was like, all right, okay. So she gets to Mallorca, and this girl, so she's at Mallorca like airport, and this girl comes like marching up towards her, and she was like, "Are you Mateo's girl?" And she was like, "Yeah, I am." And the other guy was like, "Right, okay, you know, come with me." So as we know, this girl was actually Melissa Reed.
Okay.
So this is where Melissa and Michaela and how they met. Because they didn't know each other obviously before this. Right. That's how they met. So she said that she knew Davey as well. So Melissa took Michaela back to another apartment in Mallorca where she met what we called their minder. So there was a guy that obviously was looking after him. He was called a man called Julio. So Julio, she said in the apartment, like he had like, I think he had like mobile phone, he had maybe like landline phone, but even though he had all these phones, he still went out to a phone box to make a call.
Okay.
So to me that's quite dodgy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bit dodgy.
Yeah, so basically when he was doing that, the girls, they decided to have a nosy around the apartment, so they must have just been curious, I suppose, and just had a rake through stuff, which, I mean, I don't know if I'd rake through somebody's apartment like enough, but they did.
Yeah.
So, but they opened one drawer, and that's when they found a gun. There was like guns in the drawer and that. So Michaela said at this point that she started feeling a bit fearful from that moment. She started to realise that, you know, this was a bigger thing than she'd actually thought. So I think she's starting to realise she's got herself into something that maybe, you know...
I'd be terrified if I saw a gun.
Well, exactly. So they went to bed that night, and, you know, the next morning it was time for them to fly to Lima. But Melissa had actually gone ahead on an earlier flight, so they didn't even fly to Lima together.
All right.
So Michaela had to travel over there alone, and she would meet Melissa in Peru. So it was only when Michaela had sat down on the plane, and I don't know if you're on the planes, but you know how you see like the screen on the back of the chair, and it shows you like the little plane symbol, like where you are,
so
where you're travelling to.
She realised where
and that's when she realised that Lima was not in Spain. And in fact, you know, she was heading off to South America on I think it was like a 14-hour flight or something like that.
Oh my God. So did she just think that she was like on a short haul flight just to another place
basically,
in Spain?
and I was like, I mean, I'm not the most best at geography, I suppose, but I at least knew that Lima was not in Spain.
Even if you didn't. I would have asked.
Yeah.
You know, if I didn't know, if I'm just like,
where's that? Yeah.
Where's that? Like, what country is that in? That's not a country, so what country is that in?
Yeah, but I think at the time she was obviously just, let's say she was off her face, she just kind of went along with it, she just didn't really think to ask those kind of questions clearly. Yeah. So of course she felt a bit panicked.
Good, I'm not surprised.
Exactly. So let's say it was, it was about, I don't know, actually I wrote it as about 12-hour flight, so it was, it was a long flight anyway. So as soon as she obviously, endured the flight, and as soon as she landed, she had a text from Matteo asking how her flight was, and she was like, what the fuck? Like, what do I do now? Like, what the fuck? You didn't tell me I was going to South America. What do I do now? And then he was like, oh, you actually need to get a connecting flight to Melissa?
Oh my
and she
God.
was like, you're having a laugh. Like, I've just flown all this way, and I've got to get on another plane. So obviously Michaela, she wasn't happy.
I'm not surprised.
So she had, and then I remember her saying that, she obviously had landed at Lima at the airport, and she was like, obviously didn't know where she was to go. She was panicking, like, because obviously nobody spoke the language, her language, and she was just like totally like, oh, what do I do? But she somehow managed to figure it out, and she got on her connecting flight to a place called Cusco. So we're going back in Ibiza. Parry hadn't heard from Michaela for a few days, and obviously Parry at this point still thought she was in Barcelona because that's where she'd said she'd went. And she obviously became worried, and Michaela's family actually contacted Parry. She got a text from Michaela's sister saying that she hadn't heard from Michaela in a week, which apparently was really unusual because Michaela would be in touch with her family every day. Like, she was always texting or phoning, at least being in touch in some way. So they were obviously quite concerned that they hadn't heard from her for a week. But at this point, Parry replied saying no, she hadn't heard from her. She said that she would be in Barcelona for a couple of days. But I think Parry didn't really want to kind of tell the truth, if you know what I mean. Just because she obviously thought, well, if I tell somebody I might get in trouble, sort of thing. Yeah. So at this point she just played it down and was like, I know she's going to Barcelona, but I haven't spoken to her. So that was kind of it.
That's understandable.
Yeah, exactly. So back to the girls. So the girls arrived in Cusco, and basically they had to actually act like they were tourists. So they had to act like they were there for a holiday. Mm-hmm. So they had to go on trips. And take photos where they were going, and Matteo had actually booked them on a 7-day coach trip.
A 7-day coach trip?
A 7-day coach trip, yeah. And of course at this point Michaela, she still didn't know when they were actually getting the drugs. Like, they hadn't been told anything at all. They were just told that they had to act like these tourists for basically a week.
I would hate that. I would hate just not knowing. I like to know what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly, and, So, Matteo, told her that this was the best way to avoid them getting caught. If they just acted like tourists and stuff. And, like, I've obviously seen the pictures that they had taken. They went, like, this coach trip was, like, up all these mountains, but, like, really, like, narrow. It's quite scary, actually. And I can't remember what it's called, but there's obviously, like, a famous sort of bit at the top of this mountain that they're at where it's, like, I don't know, it's, like, ruins and stuff like that, so I had, like, pictures taken there. They had pictures taken by, like, the locals. There was even a bit where, like, the police officer, they had, like, pictures taken by the local police and stuff like that. Just totally making it look like they were tourists. So by now in Ibiza, everyone was talking about Michaela, and everyone thought she was actually missing, because obviously she hadn't been in touch with anybody.
Right.
The only person that knew that she was probably in Lima was obviously Davy and this Matteo and the Julio guy. So, and obviously Parry, she only thought she was in Barcelona, so nobody actually knows where she is, because I think she must have made quite a few friends, so, so basically everybody thought she had just gone missing, and it had been 9 days since she'd been in contact with anyone. So they actually put up, like, posters and flyers, try to find her. Even newspapers back in Northern Ireland had got wind of her being missing, so it was all over, social media, and she was put on the front page of the Belfast Telegraph. So, everybody was thinking that this girl had gone missing.
Her family must have been worried sick.
I know, our family, they were absolutely, couldn't understand where she'd gone. Like I say, she'd always been in touch with them, so she just didn't know. So back in Lima, Michaela, she was starting to have, like, second thoughts now about everything that was going on, and she actually texted Matteo to question what they were doing, but basically Matteo was like, don't let me down, you're just paranoid, it's fine, it's all good. But let's say, she became paranoid, she was paranoid thinking that, everyone around them was watching them, because of Matteo saying, I've got guys looking out for you and stuff like that. She was, like, thinking that everyone was, like, looking at them and stuff. And they, she was thinking maybe were they in on it, like were these people in on it and stuff.
Yeah, you were paranoid.
Yeah, and like I say, there was that moment when these police officers actually approached them. So they came sort of walking over, and Michaela, she was like really paranoid because she was panicking, thinking, oh, did they realize, have they realised that we're up to something, basically. But it turned out that they just wanted a photo. Like, these police officers, I don't know if it's because maybe they looked so different to what the normal dress of a person in Peru was, because, all the women in that were in Peru had, like, sort of shawl on their heads and, stuff like that. Like, they're not probably... These two girls probably stuck out like a sore thumb, I think. So, yeah, so they just wanted a photo. So, like I say, they took some photos with these police officers. So, a little while after that, Mateo texts and said to get ready for the delivery of the drugs. And Mateo then texts to say that the package was ready to collect, but it turned out it wasn't just a package. It was a whole load of packages.
Oh, my God.
A guy in the street had just handed it all over to the girls, and there was nearly 12 kilos of drugs. The drugs were disguised in little packets of porridge, which I've actually seen the pic, because there's video evidence of this. There's like just packets of porridge.
So they were expected to carry packets of porridge?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So Mateo had told the girls that they had to place the drugs, for some reason, in the left-hand side of the suitcase, because basically they were left to pack it in their suitcases.
Right.
But Michaela, she was like, only one packet would fit, so Mateo said, we'll wrap the rest in clothes. But, I mean, I don't know how they were expecting to hide them, because there's a bit on a video where you see them all spread out, and I'm like, anybody, even if you're like a expert in finding it, I mean, you would know there was something a bit dodgy that when your suitcase is full of porridge packets from... Yeah. So Michaela, she like barely slept that night, because I think she was starting to get like really, really worried about it all. So the next morning, they left with their heavy suitcases, and Michaela says she couldn't even lift hers down the stairs because it was that heavy.
So surely it's going to be over the weight.
Well, not even that, but I was like, surely it might be quite obvious to somebody, like, well, if you've come on holiday, you're not going to pack your suitcase where you can't actually manage to...
Well, she might think she's got loads of shoes or something.
I don't know, maybe. But yeah, she struggled, basically, to even, get it down the stairs. So on their way to the airport, Mateo kept texting things like, well done, remember it's all been set up for you, nothing's going to go wrong, don't be afraid, you can trust me, my guys are ready to let you pass. So he was like, basically...
It's all very well for him to say.
Exactly, he was obviously just saying all these things to sort of, I suppose, give them the confidence to sort of go through it, isn't it? Because, I mean...
Yeah, just so that, like, because he'll probably be worrying about them backing out. So
yeah, exactly, so he's just saying all these things, which I don't think any of them were actually true by the sounds of it. So the girls, they arrived at the airport, and Michaela said the first thing that she noticed was how much security there was, and obviously she started to panic, like, quite a lot at this point. So she actually went to the toilet, and she sat there for about 20 minutes because she just wasn't ready to make the commitment of checking her bag in. She didn't know what to do, and deep down I think she knew it wasn't going to work. Like, she sort of, she had that feeling that this is, how am I going to get away with this? She actually did think about calling her mum, but she didn't want to stress her mum out. And she also wondered, like, what the repercussions would have been if she just walked away from it as well. So she wondered if she just thought, nah, I'm not doing it, and buggered off, then, would have anything that would have happened to it. But obviously she got herself together. She thought she's like, right, got to go and do this now. So she came back out the toilet, and Melissa was already standing in the line. So she joined Melissa in the line, waiting to check their bags in. So Michaela did actually check her bag in, and she actually seen it going like down the conveyor belt, because obviously once they've checked the bags in, there must be, before it goes away out of sight, you obviously could see it go down the conveyor belt. And it actually passed, she said it actually passed a sniffer dog, but she said the dog didn't even react to it.
Right.
So
you'd be feeling a bit more confident then.
Yeah, so basically she was starting to relax, but literally as she was starting to relax, somebody tapped her on the shoulder.
Oh.
And of course it was security.
Oh my God.
So both the girls were led away, and they began to get bombarded with lots and lots of questions. Thankfully there was somebody there able to translate, because obviously these people wouldn't be speaking English. Yeah. And they obviously must have had it on camera, because I don't know if you would remember, but the very famous video of the two of them, they were filmed standing with their bags, and they were asked like what their nationality was, It was one of the famous pictures that was splashed across the front page of the newspaper. And there's Michaela with her bun in her hair, and Melissa's got like her blonde hair down. She's got like a scarf thing around her neck with a t-shirt. But it's like a very famous. Well, obviously not. I'll show you, and you'll probably if you've seen it, you'll probably recognise it. So Michaela said she was trying not to panic, as she actually wondered if it had been part of the plan, because remember Matteo had said, "My guys have got you," so she kind of thought, oh, maybe this is part of the plan. But the next thing, like, their bags were getting opened, and again Matteo had said his friend would be looking through the bags, so to me it's clear that Michaela, she didn't really know what was going on. She was like, is this real, is this not real, like, is this part of the plan, is it not? So she was a bit, I don't know what's going on here. So let's say all the porridge packets were just like, laid across the table, and the staff actually started laughing. You could hear them laughing in the video. So they're obviously thinking,
so they obviously knew. Yeah. And thinking, oh my God, like,
duh.
Yeah.
Like, so like I say, they're laughing.
It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, basically. So they obviously, they opened a packet, which, you can see in the camera reveals just white powder. And you see them test it, and that's like with like a sort of cotton swab thing. And obviously it turned blue, which confirmed it was cocaine. So, apparently at this point everything just went crazy. Michaela said she just went, she got thrown across the room, and everybody it was just manic basically. Everything was crazy. But then the girls, they were actually left. So then it was like calmed down. The girls were left sat in a room whilst the airport security staff were deciding what to do with them. I mean, I don't know what they were deciding, because clearly they needed to be arrested, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
So she said they sat in silence for about an hour, but then they became quite emotional, wondering what their mums would think, and wondering like what they should do. So Michaela said that Melissa came up with the idea that they could tell them everything, but that they were forced to do it. So, that was what they came up with. And let's say they'd been caught with about 12 kilograms of cocaine. So, their faces were on every newspaper, every TV news report. And remember Michaela's friend Parry, she obviously was back in Ibiza, and she just saw her face come up on the screen, and she was like, oh shit. Like, she's not in Barcelona.
No.
And obviously she's like, oh my God. So, and actually, Parry, she was like, oh my God, like, what's happened? Like, what's going on? So she must have like panicked as well, because she actually had phoned like her dad, and on advice of her dad, because I think Parry had told her dad everything on the phone, and on advice of her dad, she actually flew straight home the next day from Ibiza, which actually sounded like she did the right thing, because apparently friends who she was sharing an apartment with in Ibiza actually said people came around looking for her.
Right.
So I think she was worried that Michaela's told her about it, she might know stuff, would she get in trouble, so she probably did the right thing and flew home from there. So back to the girls. The girls, they were still, so they were obviously taken to jail. They stuck to their story of being trafficked at first, and most people actually believed them at first. Most people were like, oh my God, what a shame, these girls, like, how they got into this mess, what a shame. There was an interview with Michaela's mum and sister, and they were like, yeah, we totally believe her, that this is not something she would do, we know her. So they were like totally like in shock about it, and was believing that she'd been forced to do it. But obviously, as we're going to find out, they weren't forced into doing it. So anyway, they were taken for a meeting with the head prosecutor guy, because obviously things in Peru are very different to what things are like back here.
Of course.
So they were taken for a meeting with the head prosecutor, and he made it clear not to lie, and that if they cooperated, it would get them a reduced sentence or even freedom. So he was like, because I think because Peru has got such a big drug problem, like they really crack down on like drug mules and stuff like that. Like they're really hard on them. So, but obviously there would have been, there was a condition that they would have to give information that identifies or leads to the arrest of cartel members, because basically, I don't know if you don't realise, but this is all like do with the big drug cartels, like they're massive in these sort of countries and stuff. So it was obviously something to do with them, and they would have to give them information on them. And the prosecutor basically said that he knows how the cartels work and how the girls were picked up, so don't try and pretend like you knew nothing. And you know they were asked by the translator if they wanted to continue with their story or change their minds. And at first, you know, they decided to continue with the story that they were being trafficked. They didn't change from that. So they were actually both formally charged with drug trafficking and they were refused bail. So, you know, they both intended to plead not guilty and were warned that if they had been found guilty, they could be sentenced to as much as 15 years in a Peruvian jail.
God.
And I say the prosecutors, they intended to put the full weight of the law on them, like give them the maximum sentence. If they pled not guilty, they were like going to go for like maximum sentence because they just did not believe that they didn't do it. And like maybe what's a bit different, I don't know if it is, but if they had been found guilty and they were given the 15-year sentence, they would serve the full 15 years. Like they wouldn't get out for good behaviour or anything like that. Although it kind of contradicts itself a little bit later, but that's basically what they were saying at that point. So the only chance to get their sentence reduced was to cooperate. So they weren't getting out of this. Like I think Michaela realised she was fecked at this point. So there's a reporter, again, she was in the documentary, and she, you know, because initially she was one of I think she had reported about Michaela being missing and stuff like that. So when obviously the story started developing, she actually flew out to see Michaela in prison before the trial. But again, she stuck to the story, like to the reporter.
Right.
But the reporter was like, and the reporter said to Michaela, I don't believe you. Like, I actually don't believe you. But, you know, the reporter could only report on what basically she was saying at that point. So she did get plenty of information. And she, like, they actually let her walk around, like, because obviously they were in this prison, I can't remember what it's called now, but it wasn't it was like a smaller jail that they were held in whilst they were waiting for their trial. And like this reporter got to take photos of the rooms and, you know, got to walk around it. And apparently she said, you know, it's not like a typical prison, like you had to, you know, maybe like take stuff for the guards to let you in and all that sort of stuff. So it's not like back here where you know, you'd have to get like basically she could just, it's almost like she walked in off the street and got to look around and record.
You would think that would be allowed, eh?
Yeah, but it's obviously a lot different there than it is here. So yeah, and then also she actually got information from the Peruvian police, and she was actually shown the evidence that they had the proof that Michaela and Melissa were lying. So they actually showed this reporter the proof that they had. So again, that's not something I would have thought happens here until like maybe after the trial or something. You don't show a newspaper reporter proof because you know fine well surely they're going to go and report it, and that might interfere with trials and stuff. I would have thought, but no. So I mean, because I think she got to go like there's obviously got like a drugs office unit or whatever that they deal with that, and she got to go there and, let's say, look at the stuff on that. I'm like, alright, but you know, fair enough. So as their court date approached, you know, they were still going to stick with their story, but at the last moment they did actually decide to come clean and accept the charges against them. So they did actually plead guilty. So I think they eventually realised that. I think Michaela basically said she did not want to spend 15 years in jail. Yeah. You know, I think she realised she was probably going to go to jail, but no, you know, if she pled not guilty, she didn't want to spend that amount of time in jail, basically.
She obviously wanted as less time as possible.
Yeah, basically. So they made a deal, and it was they had to submit oneself to being an effective informant as well. So they had to provide information to capture members of the organisation, and once the information was corroborated, their sentence could be reduced. Right. So the prosecution, they wanted to know where the people in Mallorca came from. They wanted names, they wanted addresses, you know, streets that they'd been in, etc. So, you know, and you know, they told the girl, it's fine, we'll protect you, you know, if you give us some information. So Michaela did actually give some basic details about, you know, she described the sort of place where she was, so they might find Julio's apartment in Mallorca. She didn't really give too much because
she probably didn't even know the address.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't really know that much, so she sort of gave them bits and pieces to try and help them, like she said about the phone box and bits and that. So she obviously gave them enough. Yeah. So, you know, let's say the girls, they were found guilty and they were sentenced to 8 years in prison, but they struck the plea bargain, which actually discounted their prison sentence to 6 years and 8 months. So they were both...
Well, it's better than 15 years.
Well, exactly, I think that, and that's what she was saying. She was like, 6 years, 8 months, like, oh my God, but it's a hell of a lot better than 15 years.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think that's where her mindset was. Like, she still couldn't get in her head, oh my God, how am I going to spend... Because she was 20 by this point as well. It's like, how am I going to spend most of my 20s in this prison? But it's better than potentially spending double the time.
Like half her 30s as well.
Well, exactly. So they were sent to a prison called Ancon Dos, which is Ancon, basically 2, because it's like Ancon 2, but it's pronounced Ancon Dos.
Okay.
And apparently that's one of the most notorious maximum security prisons in Peru.
God.
And obviously I've seen footage of the prison, and it's like, it's in the middle of a desert. It looks pretty rough. Like, I mean, I honestly don't know how she managed, like, because this has come from the documentary, so I'm assuming they obviously got access to the prison for making the documentary, because it wasn't when she was actually in it that you saw. You didn't see her in the prison, you just saw, they had footage of like what the prison was like and stuff like that, and it did look pretty
grim.
Yeah, well, that's probably putting it lightly. I think it just looked pretty horrible. So the girls, the translator that had been helping them, you know, when they were talking to the prosecutor, she must have became quite friendly with them, or she must have had quite a connection with them, because she actually visited them most weeks. And you know, she helped them a bit with the language barrier. She would bring them in food and water and stuff like that. And because again, she's in the documentary, and when you hear her talk about them, Michaela was mostly, she's like, she seems to have a bit of an affection there. So it's like she really cared about them,
right?
Really, you know, wanted to help them.
Yeah.
You know, she's rather, because I mean, I don't think a translator would really have anything more to do with them after she'd done her bit.
Yeah.
Translating, but it's almost like they obviously got a bit of after help, you know, because they were in Peru and they were, you know, in a foreign country with foreign language. So but she seemed to talk with them quite, you know, with a bit of affection and just, you know, really nice. Seemed like a nice translator. So Michaela, she described the prison as toxic. She said the people were toxic. She said it was just totally manic all the time, and it sounded like a zoo. She actually described one inmate who was a woman who had caught her husband having an affair. So the woman had actually killed their own child and fed it to her husband, like like in a stew. So I'm not, the reason I'm telling you that is because that's
the kind of people that she was with.
Some of the kind of people, yeah. So this woman had caught her husband having an affair. To punish him, killed their own child and fed it to her like a stew.
What did the child do?
Well, nothing.
That's like, I think that's the most horrible thing I've ever heard.
It is, isn't it? That's why I thought I had to put that in there, because I was like, that's quite shocking. That really is quite shocking.
Quite shocking. That's
well, yeah. I mean, it is.
That's horrendous.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, but to be fair, a lot of the population in there, because I think there was actually men in, not the men weren't in with the women, but the prison was that big. There must have been like a men's unit and a women's unit as well. But they said most of the population of the women were actually drug smugglers, like drug dealers. So I mean, there wasn't. Some of them were actually. Some of them were just like normal people that just got themselves caught up in drug smuggling because they had no choice. You know, they needed money or whatever it was. So sadly, you know, there was a lot of normal people there, but there was also some horrific ones.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah. You know, there was also, like Michaela said, you know, obviously she would work in a workshop, and there was this one day where she was sitting next to this girl, and the girl kind of leaned over to her, said something in Spanish. Obviously, at this point, she couldn't pick it up. And the next minute, she's just launched herself across the table and started stabbing this like other inmate for what? Because I think a lot of people were like gang members as well, so it must have been something gang related, and just started like stabbing this woman. And she was like, "Oh my God!" And she said like there was just like women were just openly having like sex around her and stuff. Like you know, they were just sitting there, and she was doing it in the workshop, and there's two girls having a bit like maybe in the corner. So she's like, it was just so open, and she was like, you know, she'd never seen anything like that in her life. It was, you know, it was quite horrific by the sounds of it. But yeah, so anyway, so eventually she actually I think she was like, you know, at night time she was you know, like, how do I get myself through this sort of thing? And like, I think she listened to music every night, and you know, I think eventually after one meeting with the translator, she was just like, right, I need to kind of spend my time here wisely, doing something. So she actually started to learn Spanish. So she had this little Spanish dictionary, she said, And she was like, you know, I just want to try and learn. So, but the thing was, like, at the start, you know, she was trying to have a conversation with somebody, and they'd say something, but she's like trying to look it up, but they've already carried on talking, and she's like trying to learn it. But you know, she was trying to, you know, integrate herself in there, and you know, to get through it, I guess. And there was one thing she said where she would see, because there's a couple of pictures that get released of her, that she looks quite pale and quite. I think the effects of prison were having an effect on her. But she was noticing that, like, women were getting their nails done, they were having their hairs done, and she was like, what's going on? Like, how are these women getting all that? And then she discovered that the prison had, like, a beauty salon. So she actually got a job in the beauty salon herself, which was quite good. So, you know, that's how she, you know, she started to learn more Spanish. She was earning money because, like, I think it's different back here. Like, they actually have businesses and stuff in their prisons. So, like, she earned, like, money, like, they deal in money as well, like, not like here where you need, like, I don't know if it's like credit or something they put on a card or something, but you know, it was quite different. So anyway, she got, you know, she was, and like all the women seemed to like her, and she's like I don't even have any qualifications, but she was doing people's hairs, she was doing their nails, had no qualifications, she was just totally winging it, but she was obviously doing a good job at it.
Yeah.
So, you know, she was doing quite well. So halfway through her second year in prison, Michaela became what they call a delegada, which is an elected head prisoner who is basically in charge of everything that happens on their block.
Right.
Because each block has one, and the one on their block had decided she'd had enough and stepped down.
So like a head girl kind of thing.
Yeah, and basically some of the inmates were like, oh, you should do it. And she was like, I can't do this. But obviously they obviously talked her into it. And, you know, Melissa, she thought she was crazy, you know, to do it, because she was like, how can you do this, basically? But she was like, do you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to do it. Basically, I'm going to do it. And it was between her and this Mexican woman who had been, I think the Mexican woman had been in prison for like 10 years or something. So she thought she had no chance of even, you know, doing it. But no, like all the votes were mostly for her. So she got elected for it. And to be fair, she did actually improve things. She got filters for the water, so it was clean. Got a new microwave. She even managed to get the women like an hour's dancing in the evenings, you know, something to look forward to. So she obviously made quite an impression.
Well.
Yeah. So with money and power behind her, Michaela started working on how she could get released, and you know, to get parole in Peru, apparently you need to get a contract of work and an address, which obviously she wouldn't have. But a friend said that she knew a lawyer who would sell her one, and he came to see her at the prison, and he seemed to think that they were actually going to be together, because he was like, oh, I need to tell my wife that, you know, you're coming to live, and she's like, no. There's no relationship here. Like, I'm just wanting to buy a contract of employment and an address off you.
Yeah.
You know, so he kept visiting her. But obviously Michaela made it clear that, you know, they weren't going to be together at all. And apparently that's when he got a bit shitty with her. So she was like, oh, okay, whatever. So that didn't work out. But then apparently she was told that she could actually pay for a court date. So she could pay somebody money to basically do the job that they should be doing, but do it a hell of a lot quicker. Like a bribe, I suppose, isn't it? And obviously because she was making a lot of money from the, you know, like the salon and stuff like that, she actually paid £1,000 to get a court date. So that by this point she'd been in prison for, you know, 2 years and 233 days. So she got her court date, and in court she was grilled by the prosecutor. She wanted them to understand that, you know, you can be 20 and you can make a stupid mistake, and she'd learned and she'd grown, and all she wanted to do was be with her family and have a normal life. So actually she was granted her release, which, as I said to you before, it kind of contradicts itself, because from the impression that I got, if she'd got the 15 years, she would have served it. But yet she'd only spent, in the end, it was just under 3 years that she spent in prison, and she managed to get herself out. So I was a bit contradicting on that one, so I'm not really sure. But anyway, so she managed to get her release granted. But Melissa, she actually had to remain in prison as she was still waiting for her court date. So one of the terms of Michaela's parole was that she would never be allowed to set foot in Peru again, which, to be honest, I'm pretty sure she probably didn't want to set foot in Peru again.
Yeah, that's fine, no problem at all.
Exactly. But after Michaela was released, she helped arrange for Melissa to get her parole hearing sooner as well, and she too was released. So Michaela was released in March 2016, and Melissa was released in June 2016. but she had to initially remain in Peru until a judge ruled whether she could leave the country. But apparently she applied for something called expulsion, and she was actually expelled from the country in April 2016. So yeah, obviously it wasn't very long that she had to hang there.
Yeah.
So I don't know why. I don't know if Michaela went straight home after she got released. It wasn't quite clear, but
Yeah.
obviously it was. So yeah, so basically Michaela, she's now living in Northern Ireland, where she's actually studying for a degree in international business at Belfast University. She is now also a mum to twin boys. She actually does still remain friends with many of the women that she was in prison with. And like I said to you right at the start, Melissa, she's kept a very low profile since her release. A source says that she's actually more of a recluse now, and she lives a quiet life with her dog. And I said Michaela, she also wrote an autobiography called "You'll Never See Daylight Again," and it didn't indicate in the documentary whether they were actually still friends or not. So I don't know whether they're.
Well, they weren't really. Well, they
Well, they
weren't
weren't friends before. I mean,
yeah.
they obviously went through an ordeal. I mean, because she did say in her book, there was a bit in her book that said that, you know, our real friend Melissa, that she wouldn't have got through it if it wasn't for her being there with her. So they obviously did have a friendship, but whether that's still carries on today is that. So I think the lesson there is, don't go out, if you go out of Ibiza and somebody asks you to go and pick up some drugs, don't do it. Because you might find yourself in bloody Lima.
No, just don't smuggle drugs.
I know. But I think Michaela has had a hard time in the sense of, because I've seen her do like TV interviews, you know, and like they've all kind of given her a hard time, and because obviously I think they question her about her making money from her book, but I don't think she is actually making money from her book, she said, but she's like got given a hard time, and I mean rightly so in some cases, because she obviously did quite a bad thing, but I think, you know, she did make a mistake. Yes, she owned up to the mistake. I mean,
she made a mistake. She got punished for it.
Yeah, exactly. So
let her move on.
And from the way that she conducted herself in the documentary, I mean, you wouldn't even recognise the person that was the one that got arrested. I mean, they look like two totally different people. I mean, in the sense of how she looks as well, but just, you know, she seems like she's grown up. She's obviously matured.
Well, she will be. Something like that's got to change.
Well, exactly. She realises, you know, how much of a mistake she made. She realises she fucked up. But she's also like, look, that doesn't define my life, you know. I want, you know, to make a good life now, and
everybody fucks up now and again. Maybe not on that scale, but you know what I mean. Like, everybody fucks up, and you deserve a second chance.
Exactly.
And like, as I said, she made a stupid mistake. She got caught. She did her time. Let her move on. Let her.
Exactly.
You know, why keep giving her a hard time for it?
You know, and I know. I mean, obviously, yes, she's also had a lot of publicity, but in some ways, maybe it's not a bad thing, because she's maybe making people aware not to do what she did.
Well, yeah, after listening, well, I wouldn't, you know, I'm not planning on doing it anyway,
I
but
would
after listening to that, it just goes to show what can happen to you.
Well, exactly, because like I say, I mean, she thought she was going to Barcelona to pick up a little package and ended up thousands of miles away in Peru, picking up quite a few packages.
Picking up loads of porridge.
And, I mean, obviously, because in the documentary it was like a bit of, there was like dramatised scenes of a reenactment of it as well. And seeing, you know, like, it just would never have worked. So I don't even know what the cartel's thoughts were asking these girls to do it in that way. Like, did they think they were really going to get these drugs through? I mean...
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously they want to get the drugs through, so surely they would make it...
At least a chance of being able to do that.
Yeah, give them a chance.
Exactly, and to me it just never seemed like they had a chance in doing that. It seemed so ridiculous that they were even attempting to take that many drugs through in the way that they did. But, you know, but I have to say, it was a very interesting documentary. If anybody wants to watch it, it's called Hi, Confessions of a Drug Smuggler.
What was it just on, like, normal TV?
Yeah, it was like Channel...
Like on Netflix?
No, it was like Channel 5, so I don't know, you might be able to find it on Catch Up or something, if you, in the UK, obviously. I don't know about in other countries, but certainly here in the UK you can find it there. But it was like a 5-part, there was 5 episodes in it, and I have to say it was very interesting.
I'll need to give that a watch.
Yeah, no, I actually quite enjoyed it, and if I can enjoy something, I know it was a terrible thing, but it was very interesting to hear her side of the story as well, because obviously you just see like the news reports and stuff, and sometimes I think it's good to get a person's perspective on it, especially her perspective on it. And I mean, I'd like to think that everything that she said was fairly truthful, because she's probably got no reason to lie about it. So, I mean, obviously it was her experience and what she went through. So it was interesting here. I mean, obviously I don't know whether Melissa will ever speak out about it. I mean, that's her choice not to. So
yeah.
But So that's today's episode.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for not having horrible murders.
I know. I can't promise that for next time though.
Oh, okay. No, but yeah, that was really interesting, and as you said, don't smuggle drugs. No, it's not worth it. No, it's not worth it.
Absolutely not.
So thanks for listening, everybody, and if you want to follow us on social media, then we'll put our links in the show notes.
And if you want to carry on listening to us and get our episodes as soon as they come out, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. Thanks for listening.